Coming up on Chasing the Natty, in what might have been the best weekend of college football in years, there are so many takeaways to be had from Week 7. Nate and I will discuss the incredible games and spectacles, the nuclear performances we saw from players this past week, and of course, a whole batch of players to look out for on your waivers this week. All this and more coming right after this.
Zappy looking to Jared Stearns, who makes the catch and scores.
What a burst! Trayvon Henderson, as advertised, touchdown Buckeyes!
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast.
All right, welcome in everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a wonderful ride to your work on this Monday morning. I know I would be having a great ride to my work on this Monday morning if I was thinking about the absolutely incredible weekend of college football that we had the pleasure of witnessing this past week. Good God, I love college football, but man, it has been a while since I have been that spoiled with just great games throughout the entire day, start to finish, just seeing, again, great moment after great moment. We're going to get all into that. We got, like I mentioned at the top of it, we'll be discussing all those games. We'll be discussing some of those players that went absolutely nuclear this week. We'll discuss waiver wire pickups and everything. We are going to skip on the freakout scale this week. Again, we just decided that there weren't really a lot of players that were worth discussing on that right now. A lot of the players that we expect to do well are doing well. So we'll probably get back to that maybe next week or in a few weeks when players start to fall off a little bit. But anyway, who is we? Of course, it is always our wonderful co-host here, Mr. Nate Marquise. Nate, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm great, man. I'm great. It's like you mentioned, incredible Saturday. That was an absolute thrill to watch. I vegged out on the couch, had a couple of nice beers. All the cigars being smoked in Knoxville almost inspired me to go out on the back porch and have a cigar as well. So yeah, just an incredible scene that it was, and it was hard to try to get my attention focused on one game, just because on another channel was just going crazy as well, double overtime, and one and just a shootout in the other. It was incredible.
I have never been more thankful to have a multicast feature on my TV, because having multiple games up at the same time, be able to switch back and forth between different ones.
What do you use? Do you stream or use cable?
I use streaming.
Right.
It really was a great day. Again, that 3:30 slate, especially between, but again, I was watching my Georgia Bulldogs, obviously, but again, watching Oklahoma State, TCU, and Alabama, Tennessee, both of those games on at the same time. Like, golly, dude, it was sensory overload. I couldn't handle everything that was going on. It was awesome. And then we got an awesome night slate. We'll get into all of this, but let's just go ahead and get into this. Originally, I was going to talk about some of the players first and everything, but we can talk about the players afterwards. Nate, where do you begin on this, when it comes to covering some of these games from this past week, dude?
We have to begin with Bama and Tennessee. I mean, that was just an epic game, and you're talking about two top 6 teams. Seeing that shootout between Bryce Young and Hooker, I mean, just going back and forth. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, it was with Hyatt going off. It was one of those weird deals where, I mean, he was just, every time he touched the ball, he was getting to the end zone. Literally, he only had one catch where he didn't find the end zone. It was crazy performance. Gibbs was amazing. He was he really over the last 3 weeks has shown me some things about his ability to run between the tackles, take on contact, finish runs, fall forward, all those things that we really had not seen from him in 2 years at Georgia Tech and the first half of the season. But like we talked about, man, if Alabama gets challenged like they have the last few weeks, he's a great start because they will use him for some serious volume. And if they are not challenged, then they can sit him and rest him for games exactly like we saw this weekend.
I mean, even over the past couple of years with the Alabama running backs, it's been very rare that we've seen one running back be the guy from week one all the way through, the guy that's going to get 2 touchdowns every week, the guy that's going to get 100 yards every single week. Usually things kind of shake themselves out, and we saw that again this year. Jahmyr Gibbs, I really think, is one of the most important CFF assets moving forward. Had he been performing like he has been the last couple of weeks through the first couple of seasons, he'd probably be the RB1 right now. And again, like, he is helping out this Alabama offense in a way that I don't think even really a lot of us expect. I mean, a lot of us expected him to be really good, but don't get me wrong. But like with Alabama not really kind of settling in on the passing game, like Bryce Young's still great and everything, but Gibbs is really kind of helping them open up that passing game that's struggling a little bit because, again, he is a threat on the ground. We all thought he might have been just another receiving threat, but he's helping them out. Man, there's one kind of main takeaway here because I was texting back and forth to my sister basically this entire game. She's an Alabama fan, so we were discussing the whole game. And one thought kind of kept popping into my head when it comes to how Tennessee performed in this game. And that is that Alabama really got a taste yesterday of what it is like, what it has been like to face Alabama these last couple of years, where it feels like you can claw your way to every point that you can get, but it doesn't matter because there's one play away from Tennessee at any given moment. They could have a 60, 70-yard shot down the field, and boom, they got a touchdown. Boom, you're right back where you started. You're 7 points behind. You're 14 points behind. And again, Alabama's DBs, I don't want to say they got exposed yesterday because, again, they're great players. It's just it was a mismatch. Jalen Hyatt was a mismatch for them all day long. Again, you mentioned it, Nate. He only had one catch that wasn't a touchdown. That was on purpose. He was that play that it's like whenever you're playing Madden, if you're playing the computer especially, and you just find out that there is one play that just keeps working for you over and over and over again, the defense can't stop it. That's what they did with Hyatt all day long yesterday, and it was like a video game.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's a great point. Alabama kind of gets a taste of their own medicine, really, and what it's like to face an offense. It's absolutely unstoppable. I mean, take it from an OU fan. It puts a lot of pressure on your offense if you know you have to score every dang possession.
Yep.
And that kind of where, even though you know your offense is great, you have to take the ball out. I mean, every time you get the ball, you're like, gosh, we have to score this possession. Otherwise, we're going to continue to fall behind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the performance that the two quarterbacks put on, man, Bryce Young, I swear, he is impossible to tackle in a phone booth. That guy is so slippery in the backfield.
I put out a tweet yesterday. I still think people are underrate Bryce Young. I do not think people realize how much that man elevates Alabama, and Alabama's a hard team to elevate. That's how special he is, dude.
He had countless times he slithered out of getting sacked just because of his ability to just move around in the pocket. And of course, he never really does it to run. He doesn't do it to advance with his legs. He does it to free up time with his arm. And a couple times he just made incredible escape moves and then throws just pinpoint passes down to the sidelines over defenders, right? I mean, in a 1 foot window, he's placing it right there, 25 yards downfield. It's incredible. And Hendon Hooker is one of the most underrated deep ball passers. I mean, you talk about just incredible accuracy on those throws to Hyatt and in all of these. And what's still mind-boggling is that that's what this offense that Heupel and Gulish is predicated on, is how do you throw the deep ball and how can you be accurate with the deep ball, because they're constantly pushing it downfield. And yet Joe Milton, of all people, started the first 2 weeks last year, who has one of the
I still don't
least
get that.
accurate deep balls. Sure, he can throw it a mile. That's why he was that's why he was in on the Hail Mary attempt right before half, but he is so incredibly inaccurate. But yeah, what a great game.
It really was. And like, again, I being honest here, I was rooting for Bama in this game. Again, like my family is mostly Alabama fans. We all don't like Tennessee for the most part. Because again, I'm a Georgia fan. They're Tennessee or they're Alabama fans, so that's kind of where the overlap is. Same with Auburn. We both hate Auburn. Yeah. But man, it again, just from a neutral perspective, that's probably going to be game of the year by the end of this year. Now, later in the night, we got a game that is going to give it a run for its money, and I'm going to go there next. Yeah. Utah takes down USC 43-42. God, what an incredible game. This was, once again, another just offensive shootout right here. Play after play being made. Not as many plays on the defense being made in this game. Again, with Alabama, Tennessee, you had stops, you had turnovers made by the defense at certain points during the game. Utah, USC is just pure offensive shootout. And Caleb Williams, man, going into this game, a lot of people thought he could struggle against this Utah defense, and he really put on a show for the most part. I believe he's one of the quarterbacks this week that easily hit over 40 points, if not higher. And he, like, man, this weekend has been so hard to put into words of like exactly how incredible it truly was. This was a game in the fourth quarter. The cameras you could see shaking.
Yeah.
In the fourth quarter, you can see the camera shaking by just how loud, how ruckus that stadium was trying to take down Caleb Williams and this USC offense in the fourth quarter. I'm so giddy from this game. Nate, what is your thoughts on it?
What I loved about this game, and I think what makes Kyle Whittingham so good, I think he's one of the 10 best coaches in America. He's criminally underrated as far as his ability as a coach and what he's done there at Utah. But I think this game was a perfect example of the difference between him and, say, somebody like Jimbo Fisher. And I know we beat up on Jimbo all the time on this pod. It seems to be a reoccurring theme. It's not intentional. But you could tell after about a quarter into this game, you could tell Whittingham was just like, you know what? We're not running the ball anymore. We are going to pass the ball like crazy because we can expose their DBs. We're going to get out of this normal Utah pattern of we're just going to pound it down your throat, get 5 to 6 yards of carry and that type of thing. And I mean, Dalton Kincaid was obviously the biggest beneficiary of this.
Oh,
change.
yeah.
But they even said after the game that Whittingham told Andy, I forget the offense coordinator's name. Andy Ludwig, I think is his name. Told him that, hey, anytime we make it past the 50, 4 downs every time, every possession. There are no punts, there are no field goals. We're going for it every time when we get past the 50. So it's just that incredible mentality of we're going to be crazy aggressive, and then it showed on the last play going for 2. I was frustrated personally because, you know me, I own Caleb in just about every league, and I needed that overtime points, man. We'll talk about it later, but incredible amount of shootouts. You needed every point you could get just to secure your week. But yeah, I mean, him going for it for 2, another sign of just how aggressive he wanted to be in that game.
And again, it's one of those things where if they don't make the 2-point, everybody hates on him for it. But because they did, he looks like a genius.
Right.
But honestly, I think he made normally I kind of am against that. I'd rather just go for the overtime. But again, we clearly saw that entire game. Neither one of these defenses were stopping either one of these offenses. You didn't want to get into a continued shootout with USC. He made the right decision knowing that his offense, as great as they have played, was not going to be able to keep up with USC all day long. It's just go for it, win it right there. And Cameron Rising, what an incredible day he had right there. Again, we'll get into some of these individual player performances in a bit here, but again.
I think it was a big game changer, too, when Jordan Addison went down with an injury.
I knew I was forgetting something, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that USC offense, his ability to get into space and get open, and then hit, the damage he could do with the ball in his hands after he catches it. It looked like a slightly different USC offense after that happened. So I think that was a pretty big takeaway from that game as well. It's going to be, they have a bye week.
Yeah.
We don't know how severe the injury is to Addison.
Addison was seen on crutches on the sideline.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely didn't look good. He looked like he was in a ton of pain. So that's a real bummer for him, but it's possible that offense isn't quite as effective moving forward without him being the cog in that pass game.
On the silver lining of these things, I am a manager of a lot of Mario Williams shares, and so if Addison's out for an extended period of time, those shares just went whew.
Yeah, no doubt.
Other games here we could talk about. Oklahoma TCU, man, or Oklahoma State TCU, excuse me. Man, it looked like that Oklahoma State was ready to have TCU's number the first half of this game. And then I noted, again, one of my favorite things to do in games that I don't quite catch every little detail of. Again, this game was on at the same time as the Alabama-Tennessee and Georgia-Vanderbilt game. So this one was getting about a third of my attention at most. I love going onto the Reddit threads on the r/CFB Reddit subreddit, because that is where you'll get just the pure reaction of fans, people pointing things out that you will never expect. And so many of them were so quick to point out that the moment Oklahoma State went into halftime with the lead, Mike Gundy shut it down. Tried to run the ball, wanted to just kind of run the game clock out, and TCU would not give up. Quentin Johnson, your boy, had another great day. Quentin Johnson's season is fully a go right now. 8 receptions, 180 yards, and a touchdown for him. He had an incredible day. Again, this was just a fun game. Went into overtime. What were you thinking, Nate?
Yeah, I watched quite a bit of this one, trying to go back and forth between this one and the Alabama-Tennessee game. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It was really weird to see Oklahoma State just kind of go into this shell and not push the ball downfield at all. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that we knew that Spencer Sanders was banged up, and they just didn't want to, they just wanted to get out of there as quickly as they could, really. And it looked like they had that thing secured. I think with like a minute 30 left in the third quarter, they were up by 14. But yeah, TCU kept chipping away, and obviously it's a Sonny Dykes offense, so they can score in a hurry at times.
Yep.
Kendre Miller is a fantastic running back, and say what you will about Max Duggan, he's clearly improved. He's clearly a better quarterback with Sonny Dykes as his offensive and Garrett Riley, Lincoln Riley's brother, as his offensive coordinator. So that's you can tell that he is really comfortable in that system, and he got banged up a little bit too, but I think that he still played through in overtime. So it's clear that he has realized that I've got a first round draft pick out on the boundary here as my wide receiver. I should probably get him the ball.
I would say probably take advantage of that just a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it does help that they also have, again, Darius Davis and Tay Barber are two guys that have kind of emerged here. And so it takes some of the pressure off of Quentin Johnson just a little bit, because if you're going to double up on Quentin Johnson, those other two guys are going to beat you.
They have so much speed. Their wide receivers are crazy fast.
Yep.
Man. They can really, similar to Tennessee, man, they can stretch the field a lot, and that's tough. That's tough to defend.
Oh, yeah. Dykes walked into a perfect scenario when he picked TCU as his next job.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then on the Oklahoma State side of things, again, there are rumors that Spencer Sanders was not going to play in this game, that he was banged up, he was injured. Based on that first half performance at the very least, didn't look like it at all. He looked like he was totally fine. Yeah. Completely tore up TCU there for a little bit. But I'm also really happy because, again, I was really fearing for a lot of my picks from Saturday, because I picked TCU to win, I picked Utah to win, and like all of my teams started coming back right at the very end. It was great.
Yeah. Let's talk real quick. I want to talk about Michigan for a second.
Let's talk about that.
What that performance say that
you mean they're lacking 416 rushing yards?
That was insane, man. I was sitting there, I was watching this, and of course, for me, it was a really freezing cold takes reality hit kind of day, with the fact that I had Blake Corum and Charlie Jones on the recent article that I wrote, as far as like guys that are unlikely to, or most likely to see a regression.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be damned if Blake Corum's Michigan just doesn't care. They don't care who they're playing.
Nope.
They don't care what the deal is. They're just going to run it down your throat, and they are so good at it. And Blake Corum is just a fantastic running back, man. His vision is great. It was incredible. And Donovan Edwards even put up like close to 175 yards and a couple touchdowns. They were just breaking off massive runs on Penn State. I don't know what to make of it.
Penn State going into this game was the 5th rushing defense in the country. They gave up more yards against Michigan on the ground than they did the entire year.
Do you think Penn State is a little bit of a fraud, or do we just think Michigan is that dominant with their offensive system and what they want to do?
I think Michigan is a legit contender for the Big Ten. I think they're going to give Ohio State a good run for their money, and similar in a way that Tennessee clearly is challenging Alabama and is going to later challenge Georgia down the line. Do I think that they're in that top tier yet? I don't think I'm ready to put them there yet, because again, just based on recruiting, based on just historical trends and everything like that, I think they're not quite there yet. However, I do think they have perfected the system that they want to do, and that is always a scary thing for anybody that has to go up against them. So
I read a stat that James Franklin is like 0-10 versus top 10 teams.
Yeah, especially on the road, he's atrocious. Like I had no problem picking Michigan in this game to win.
Yeah. I mean, if Michigan can just basically, beat up teams the way that they did Penn State, then I think you're right. I mean, I don't know that Ohio State is going to face anything quite like this, and it is going to be interesting to see if Michigan does come out and just kind of punches Ohio State in the mouth with this run game, those first couple drives, and see how Ohio State responds. Yeah, well, it's gonna be a great game.
I mean, we'll see. Again, they punched him in the mouth last year and went on to win the Big Ten, went on to the playoff and everything like that. So maybe Ohio State doesn't get caught off guard this year.
I know that a lot of people are like clamoring and thinking that this is going to be the game that pushes James Franklin into making the QB switch.
No,
and I will say, you're going to be disappointed. There are a handful of coaches out there that are absolutely will dig their heels in and go kicking and screaming before they start a freshman over a proven commodity. And James Franklin is one of those guys. So I'll be shocked if Drew Allar comes in and all of a sudden starts getting snaps.
Oh yeah, if he didn't throw Drew Allar out during this game, there's no way he's going to make that switch. Are they on a bye this week?
He did play at the end of the game.
Oh, did he?
I think that's what they made.
Okay.
I mean, it was out of hand, but I mean, I think Allar went like 5 for 10 or something like that. I mean, make no mistake, Sean Clifford was terrible. But yeah, I'll be surprised if an official QB change happens.
Yeah, you ate some crow on some of your plays this week in terms of guys regressing, Nate. But I'll eat some crow on a pick that I think all of us really made on Saturday. But I got to give props to them. Props to Kentucky. They shocked me on this one. I really thought Mississippi State was catching them at a bad time. I thought that Mississippi State would be able to go in there, not do whatever they want. I figured that they would be slowed down a little bit, but man, Kentucky. Chris Rodriguez really is a game changer for them. They couldn't run the ball to save their lives without him, and he put up close to 200 yards yesterday against this Mississippi State defense, which is a pretty good run defense, no doubt about it. And again, Chris Rodriguez, if you held on to him, just holding on to him like down in your like injury reserves or just somewhere on your bench, he's paying off for you big time right now. I'm worried about my under that I took on him on Prize Picks the season long. And he missed 4 games, and he's already almost halfway to beating his like season long, and he's only played like 3 games so far. Again, he's been incredible. So props to Kentucky. They caught me off guard on that one.
Luckily for you, they still have Georgia, so there's at least one game left where he's unlikely to go off.
I don't know. Georgia's given up like one big explosive play pretty much every game that they've gotten, and it usually goes to one of the better players on the team. So we'll see.
I think what we probably saw in this Mississippi State Kentucky game, number one, Leach always will have a clunker or two that he'll throw out there each season. So it's possible that this is the one. It's a road game right before they play Alabama against a Kentucky team that had been kind of, okay, not great lately.
Yeah.
And Will Levis being banged up and stuff like that. They probably thought they could go in there, set their helmets on the field and walk out a winner and go get ready for Alabama. And that definitely did not happen. So that's, like I said, Leach has a clunker or two, and Kentucky's got a solid enough defense to figure out some of that air raid stuff.
Yeah.
Last one that I really wanted to hit on real quick before we hopped into some of these players was the end of that Texas-Iowa State game.
Oh my God, dude.
I felt terrible for Xavier Hutchinson. Did you see that drop?
Oh, I know. I that was one of the games I was watching at noon. I have been clamoring for Iowa State to get a win. They have lost their last 4 conference games by a combined 14 points, dude.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue what you're going to say.
I was just going to say, man, for an Oklahoma fan, we were so close to having the perfect day. Oklahoma wins, Oklahoma State loses, and Texas was supposed to lose. And it looked like that, like when that ball was in the air and Xavier Hutchinson was just streaking free with nobody within like 10 yards of him. I'm like, all right, here we go. Touchdown. Texas is finally going to get exposed a little bit here. And this amazing wide receiver just straight up dropped the ball. I can't
literally drop the ball.
And then they continue on the drive, and Hunter Deckers just gets absolutely plowed right in his kind of basically his neck area, and is unable to, and he ends up fumbling on that play, and
should have been a targeting.
Game over. It definitely should have. Yeah, we have seen on with the incredible amount of targeting calls there have been this year, we have seen way worse calls, like way lighter hits get called for targeting than that one right there. So it was a crazy finish. And but props to Bijan in Texas, because they found a way to come out winning.
Oh yeah, again they made plays when they needed to. Again, that second quarter really helped out Texas a lot once that offense got going, because it looked rough in the first quarter. Iowa State looked very legit. This is another game where, again, I had a prop where I wanted Burt Auburn over 1.5 field goals, and as soon as he missed the first one in the first quarter, I'm like, well, that prop's out the window. I bet he's never going to get that chance back.
Yeah.
So, any more games I want to throw out here? Oklahoma, Kansas. That was a kind of a fun one. Just talk about your team for a little bit here, Nate.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit last week on the pod. I don't think, and this isn't hyperbole, I don't think there's any one player, maybe Hendon Hooker. I don't know that there's any one player that means more to their team. He's not going to win the Heisman. He's probably not even going to be first team all Big 12. But Dylan Gabriel is probably the most important player to his team, because the drop off between him and Davis Bevell is the Grand Canyon 100%. And so with having him back, the offense looked totally different, and they were definitely clicking on all cylinders. They were scoring with ease. The defense was not good again. So if you have any Oklahoma Sooners, Mims, Gabriel, it was a great day. It was a great day for them. I will say two things that stood out real quick from this game. I do not think Marcus Major is going to get the running back 2 job back from Barnes. I think the freshman has taken that job, and I think he's running with it even when Major is healthy. I think that Barnes has secured himself as the RB2. And then I will say that as far as tight ends go, I seriously think that Willis is a legit top 10 tight end this year.
He is currently tight end 6.
Yeah, and I think he will stay. And I don't think it's a fluke. He is such a vital part to their offense. He really, when they involve him, just good things happen. And he's very diverse, and there's still a chance we see some more. He was running some Wildcat, so there's a chance you could squeeze out a touchdown or 2 just from rushing with him this year.
Yeah. Again, I love hearing that. I literally picked up Willis off the waiver wire in one of my leagues because I realized that because I had Kuntz in there and then Kuntz got hurt again. I'm like, oh crap, I need to go grab somebody real quick. Grabbed Willis. He basically helped save my week, so it was great. Real quick, in 10 seconds are left here. Georgia killed Vanderbilt yesterday. It was a bloodbath. It was bad, but it was great as a Georgia fan. Alrighty, let's talk about some of the again. This weekend was awesome, but even more awesome just from a CFB perspective. From a CFF perspective, there were a ton of great player performances this past week that I feel like it is worth, especially since we're not doing the freakout list, it is worth taking some time to really highlight some of these awesome performances from this past week. And we'll start with the quarterbacks here. We had 7 quarterbacks this past week hit above 40 points, and this is in 4-point passing touchdowns and half PPR. Just clarifying for everybody, so if you're wondering, like, oh, I had way more quarterbacks hit over 40, it's like, well, you had 6-point passing touchdowns. Anyway, 7 quarterbacks hit above 40 points, 2 of them hit above 50. These are John Rice Plumlee, Cam Rising, Daquan Finn, Todd Centeio, Jaden Daniels of LSU, Michael Penix, and Hendon Hooker and Caleb Williams. What's even better is that so many of those guys, maybe outside of Jaden Daniels, are guys that you more than likely started. So like it's not, these aren't random guys that you have on like 0.7% of your DFS lineups. These are guys that you were counting on and they came through for you here. So Nate, what talk to me about some of these quarterbacks.
Yeah, 2 things stands out. I think that was a great point you're talking about when you say that these are guys that you started with these massive points output that we saw this weekend. It was a lot of your studs that went off. There wasn't a ton of that. And that's why we had a difficult time just figuring out who we were going to put on some of these waiver wire lists, because it was so many good performances from guys that you expected and you drafted to have these types of performances. The other thing that stands out is that it was such an incredible scoring week that I totally forgot about John Rice Plumlee being, like I think he had like 7 touchdowns or whatever.
Yeah.
Thursday night or Friday night, whenever that game was played, seems like 3 weeks ago because of just how many incredible performances there were. But man, he was awesome for sure.
There were so many incredible performances this past week that I thought I had one game in the bag after starting John Rice Plumlee on Thursday night. I lost that game because there was just enough great performances to where my opponent was able to overcome me.
In my home league, I scored the second most points that anybody has scored in a week all season. And Kyle Francis beat me because he scored the most points anybody has ever scored.
Oh, dude, those are the freaking worst. I hate games like that.
But I it does suck. But at the same time, I was like, this is the best. Like,
if you're gonna lose, that's how you go out.
Hooker and Williams going bananas, and he's got Charlie Jones and Hyatt going bananas. And I'm like, I'm torn. Do I want Hyatt to score this touchdown? I kind of do because I want Hooker to get it. But it's just, man, it was just incredible.
Dude, I love CFF. This is weekends like this are getting me so giddy for this entire sport in general. Let's talk about some of these running backs. This past week, we had 6 running backs score above 35 points. 2 of them went over 40. And again, this is a little bit more of a hodgepodge of different guys, not quite the first round or second rounder kind of guys, except maybe for one of them. But Blake Watson out of Old Dominion had an absolute monster day. Marion Lukes, who we'll get to in a little bit here, the backup running back for Central Michigan, had a monster day. Keaton Mitchell coming back for East Carolina, he had an absolutely monster day. Brad Roberts out of Air Force scored like 3 touchdowns in 5 minutes, it felt like, to start that game. Carson Steele for I always forget, Miami of Ohio or Ball State.
He's Ball State.
Ball State.
Is that, dude? You're not the only one. I can't figure out the 2 of them in my head.
I don't know why I always confuse those 2 teams.
I just remember that. I don't know. It could be Miami of Ohio. You may be right. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it's Ball State, actually, because I remember now Miami of Ohio is the one that never has a good running back because they split everything up and they can't run the ball to save their lives.
It's Ball State. I just looked it up.
Yes. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, running back for Alabama, absolutely had a great day for himself there as well. Nate, what stuck out to you here among these running backs?
It was great to see Mitchell back healthy. He's so dynamic. I mean, every time he touches the ball, the end zone is within reach at any moment. So, I honestly didn't even realize there's so many big scoring outputs. I didn't even check the Ball State box score. I didn't even realize Carson Steele put up that big of a game. So good for him. And Watson, I think, averaged like 11 yards a carry or something stupid.
Absolutely
like that.
Destroyed the Chanticleers, dude. That game came out of nowhere. Like I was literally blown away when I saw the final box score of that game, because I'm like,
that defense is not good for Coastal. They have they've kind of done it with a little bit of smoke and mirrors so far this year, and they got exposed. And I think we could see that moving forward, which is good if you got guys going up against Coastal.
Yeah, and again, like so many of these guys, I'm looking at like my stat sheet for this year and everything. This past week just vaulted so many of these guys to near the top. Brad Roberts has been absolutely incredible. He's RB5, Jahmyr Gibbs RB7, Carson Steele RB9. Again, some of the like I said, the studs that you are starting to that you started in order to get you points like this, they're pulling through for you finally. Again, it's also partially like, and again, we'll get to this on the waiver wire, and part of the reason why we're kind of struggling so much to find these guys now is that it feels like we're at the point in the season where we've identified who the studs are. There's not so much shuffling going on from here on out unless there's like injury. Teams have settled in. They know who their main guys are. So
absolutely.
We'll talk about the wide receivers real quick. Not as many high performers in the wide receivers because we only had 4 wide receivers hit above 35 points. Only, I know, wow. And then 3 of them hit above 45. We talked about earlier the absolute monster game from Jalen Hyatt. 6 receptions, 207 yards, 5 touchdowns. He went over 50 points. Probably one of the, I think it might be the highest scoring performance from a wide receiver so far this year. Just absolutely monster. Tyrone Howell, wide receiver out of UL Monroe. We'll get to him in a little bit. Trey Palmer, Jesus Christ. Trey Palmer finally had the game that I think, Nate, you and I have been waiting for him to have for a while, and all it took was a shootout with Purdue. Absolutely monster game from him. And then Puka Nacua finally, like, truly back healthy for BYU, and of course, he comes back, absolutely performs for them. If you've held on to him, you are feeling very happy about that so far. Nate, what do you think about these 4 guys?
Yeah, similar to Mitchell. I mean, Nacua, it just seems like every week we get health updates on if he's playing, if he's not. He suits up. Sometimes he doesn't play. Sometimes he plays like 3 series and then he ends up going back out. So it was good to see what he's capable of when he gets a complete game under his belt. And he was pretty amazing. And yes, I'm totally with you. Palmer is a freaking stud, and it's clear that they're just going to continue to feature him as much as possible. And he just put on a great performance. Yeah.
The only thing that kind of makes me worried a little bit about Palmer is the fact that he's got the schedule is pretty rough to end the year. I did, unfortunately, again, so a quick story real quick. In one of my leagues, I was trying to trade for a running back because I am in desperate need of a running back in this league. It's a Power 5 only league, and my 2 best running backs are Gyro Brock and Amarian Hampton. It's bad. Ooh, it's bad. So I was trying to trade away Trey Palmer, and I'm like, you know what? Like, he's gonna have a rough end of the year. I might as well get a running back out of it. And so I sent a trade for Xavier Valladay at Arizona State. And I figured, I'm like, okay, like somebody's going to bite on this, or this guy's going to bite on this. The guy waited until after Palmer had this absolutely nuclear performance to accept the trade. Yeah. And I'm not going to lie, like part of me is like, hey, he's going to have a rough end of schedule. But at the same time, I'm like, man, it feels really rough to lose him right after that.
I will, if I see a guy going nuclear like that and I've got a trade out there, like where I'm offering him, I'll pull it back and then check the pulse of the league again the next day.
Oh,
hey, are you sure you're not interested in Trey Palmer?
Oh, I completely forgot that the trade was still out there, because I offered this trade on like Tuesday or Wednesday, right. So it had been a couple of days. Anyway. And then one last one. We talked about it earlier, so we won't talk about it too much here. But Dalton Kincaid, what an absolute awesome performance. That is the performance we've been looking for out of the Utah tight end, especially once Brant Keithy went down. We knew that this was a possibility for Dalton Kincaid because, again, he is that main target now for the Utah offense. Clearly, him and Rising have a lot of chemistry together. And in a big game, in a big moment, he stepped up for them again. And you'll probably never see a performance out of a tight end like this in a long, long time. But again, 16 receptions, 234 yards, and a touchdown. Absolutely monster game for him.
Yeah. Real quick, one thing that you could project a little bit of a breakout coming from him was that I think it was after last week's game or maybe the week before, Kyle Whittingham said, we need to get him the ball more. And I checked the box score and he had like 6 targets, 5 catches, 80 yards. I was like, damn. I felt like you guys were getting the ball. And for a tight end, that seems like quite a bit of usage. And then I was like, oh, this is what he means.
This is what he means. This is like,
20 targets, we're getting him the ball more. I get it.
This man is the best. This man's the best player on the field. That's what he meant.
Yeah.
Alrighty, real quick before we get into anything further, I do want to run through a list of the injured players from this past week. And again, don't have a ton of information on a lot of them because that's just the nature of CFF. But it is something that if you have these players, keep an eye out for news throughout the week as to their condition. LaDamian Webb, man, that killed me in a league or two because he had like 7 yards before he went down with an injury. Richard Reese, definitely keep an eye out for news on that one because he was having a pretty decent day for Baylor. Got into a shootout, didn't get used as much, but then on like the final, 5 drives, he only had like 1 carry, something ridiculous like that.
I've searched and I have not seen any word. Obviously, they'll have a press conference at some point this week. Maybe we'll get something. I just don't know I think it's a situation where they're just shuffling players around in that backfield, and it's like you're having to play a guessing game as to who's going to be the featured guy every week. It reminds me of Toledo. We talked about Stewart last week, and who ends up being the guy that gets 20 carries this week? Penny Boone. He's
of course.
So yeah, just when you think they've settled on a guy,
no Boone's about it.
Seems to be what's going on in Baylor there.
Anyway, other players here. Cooper Lega, I believe, was taken out of the game for Utah State with a concussion, so he might be out for a game or two. I think they might have a bye this next upcoming week, so hopefully he'll be back for that next game.
They play at Wyoming.
No, they're off week 9, not week 8. My bad. Yeah. Again, bye weeks. Got to keep them straight. Talia Tagovailoa was taken off the field in the game against Indiana. He's probably out for a game or two from the sounds of that injury. Lou Nichols didn't even travel with Central Michigan, which is very concerning to me. The fact that he just wasn't even there. I don't know if this was a suspension or if he is hurt to the point where they just don't need him on the field and everything. But regardless, it definitely kind of points to somebody we'll talk about here in a little bit. Henry Parrish was a late scratch for Miami, so keep an eye out for that. Jordan Addison, we mentioned earlier, was injured during the game against Utah, was seen in crutches, so very likely this is at the very least, an injury that is going to probably make him miss some time. Hopefully not for the end of the season. Again, we all pray that doesn't happen. Jaden Bray, once again, just out right before the game. Man can't stay healthy. If he could actually get out there, I feel like he'd be phenomenal. Aiden Robbins, the running back at a UNLV, had a knee injury early in the game against Air Force. He didn't come back in, so he's probably nursing something pretty serious. And then Tyrese Chambers, not a late scratch, but he was called out before the game started for FIU. So if you're still rostering Tyrese Chambers, keep an eye out for that. Nate, do you have any info on any of these guys you want to share?
No, it looks like Cooper Lega was out with a head injury, so it's possible he's in concussion protocol. They put Levi Williams in, quickly figured out he's not very good at quarterback, and went to the 4th stringer. So
Davenport, the freshman.
Yeah.
So, I believe that, we're at a point where we'll move on to the waiver wires here in a second. But of course, it's almost 45 minutes in, and guys, I'm itching because you know what I haven't done yet? I haven't given my spiel yet. I have to give you guys my spiel. So again, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Again, really like those comments. Again, you guys have been laxing a little bit on those, so let's get those back up this week if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this on podcast, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, make sure you leave that written 5-star review. And in addition to that, I'm going to give you guys one additional instruction this week. You guys all have friends who love college football but just don't play fantasy. regardless, I want you to send our podcast over to them. Again, we talk about fantasy all the time, but we talk about players, we talk about games. This is a podcast for everybody who loves college football, so make sure you send them over to that. And it'll be a great way to get them interested in college fantasy so you can get them into leagues next year. You guys know you want to have more friends in the CFF space, so let's do it. We are part of the CFF team here at Campus Canton. Is myself, Nate Marquise, Brandon Sanders, Chris Moxley, as well as our DFS crew in Ethan Sowers and Chris K. They have all been doing awesome content, whether it's podcasts like the Chase and Natty podcast here on Mondays and Wednesdays, in addition to the Bet on C2C podcast with Brandon, Chris, and Ethan. We got awesome articles. Nate just put out his regression article. It is awesome. Definitely go check that out. Despite the fact that Charlie Jones and Blake Corum scored a lot of touchdowns this week, it is still an insanely smart article, so absolutely go check that out. We got weekly CFF rankings for you guys. Chris Moxley has been killing it with those every single week. A great way for you to kind of give yourself a little tiebreaker in terms of who to start and who to sit each given week. And yeah, that pretty much brings us to the end of the spiel. Appreciate you guys listening. Let's get into these quarterbacks here. So, we got 4 quarterbacks here, 5 running backs, 5 wide receivers, and only 1 tight end this week. Again, kind of, I don't want to say slim pickings this week on the waiver wire, but you'll notice probably with me and Nate's tone with some of these guys that we're not super endorsing them like we probably would have in the past with some of them. Although this first guy we'll talk about here is somebody that I think I don't understand how he's still at 19%. We talked about him a couple weeks ago. The system's there, everything's there. He had like 2 games under 20 points. But other than that, everything else is pointed to the fact that he can have monster games like he had this past week. Of course, I'm talking about Kyle Van Treese, the quarterback out of Georgia Southern. Again, all I need to tell you is just how many points or how many passing attempts he's been getting per game. The last 4, 39, 43, 49, 64. This is an insanely pass-heavy offense. He has scored multiple touchdowns in each of the last 4 weeks. He has been able to use his legs at times, but for the most part, this is an air raid system, and you want air raid quarterbacks on your roster. Again, is this a guy that you're probably starting week in and week out? Some leagues I am, but like some weeks, like he's definitely a great option to just keep on your bench there. Nate, what do you think about Kyle Van Treese?
You can't deny the volume. I think that Georgia Southern may be leading the country in pass attempts per game. I know they were at one point, and he just attempted 64 or more in his last game. So if they're not leading, they're definitely top 5. So, yeah, it's an insane amount of volume. They have Old Dominion coming up this week. Old Dominion's coming off a big win, but at the same time, they still gave up over 300 yards passing in that game. So it's not like they're a super, scary situation that you wouldn't want to start him against. I think you can start him fairly comfortably there. So, yeah, it's just a volume play, and it's a good one.
I mean, yeah, and they just went up against James Madison, who has shut down several other offenses so far this year. Like, they got a pretty good defense there with the Dukes. And Van Treese
78 yards.
I would say Van Treese passed for almost 600 yards on them. So this is a potential matchup proof kind of guy.
Yeah.
So
he's extremely valuable. 6-point pass per touchdown, or 6-point per passing touchdown scoring. I mean, he's even that much more valuable. But yeah, the volume is there.
Yeah. All right, moving on to our second quarterback here. Let's talk about Michael Pratt, the quarterback out of Tulane. This is another guy that, for the most part, I'm kind of surprised that people haven't really kind of got on a little bit more, especially it's just a safe week-by-week play. Lowest points he's scored this year per week has been 19.68 fantasy points, and lately he has scored 25 and 34. He has seen 30-plus passing attempts in the last 2 games. He loves to use his legs whenever he can. He has 3 games this year of over 55 rushing yards. I like Michael Pratt quite a bit here. Tulane, I believe, just got ranked in the top 25 AP poll, so they're going to be favored in a lot of their games moving forward. They're expected to score points any given week. Nate, what do you think about Mr. Pratt here?
I think it's becoming a recurring theme that whoever plays South Florida gets put on the waiver wire list next week. So, I don't like him as much as I like Kyle Van Treese.
Oh no, I agree.
I don't
Teardrop.
I don't think the ceiling is there for Pratt, but the floor clearly is. I think that basically 20 points is his floor. And they play Memphis this coming week, so there's shootout potential in that because Memphis plays at a pretty decent pace, and they can score points. So yeah, I think he's got a really safe floor, and he's just a really solid play. You're probably not going to get 40 out of him, but you're definitely going to get in that 30-point range, which is really all you can ask for.
Yeah, especially as we're getting into these week 7 through 9 are just brutal when it comes to bye weeks and everything. This is the perfect guy for if you messed up and realized that 3 out of your 4 quarterbacks on your roster all are off on the same bye week and you have to start 2 quarterbacks. This is the guy that you can go pick up and feel pretty good about yourself any given week.
Yeah, he got banged up against Southern Miss and K-State, and he finally looks healthy again. So I think that's the big thing there.
Yes.
That, with him healthy, I do think that he's becoming more of a solid play.
It also helps that Tyjae Spears is finally reemerging again as well. So he has some.
He's really good.
Yeah, Tyjae Spears is awesome, but like he finally has some pressure off of his back a little bit to carry this entire offense. So can open it up a little bit more. All right. Moving on here. Again, another guy that is a great spot start. Not a guy that I'm going week by week, obviously, because he can put out some duds as he did against Georgia Tech and Northwestern. But we got to talk about Riley Leonard, the quarterback out of Duke. Again, multiple games of 30-plus passing attempts, but also even more importantly, this dude loves to run the ball. He is a true dual threat quarterback. Out of all the games he has played this year, he has been under 50 rushing yards only twice in this past week against UNC. Now, granted, a lot of it came off of one really big play, but even still, he ran for over 100 yards. He has that kind of upside. This is the kind of guy that you love to just kind of plug into your lineup whenever you need it. If he's going up against a really good matchup, I like Riley Leonard quite a bit. Nate, what do you think of him?
This Duke offense has been one of the more surprising offenses, I think, that we've seen. Nobody was really expecting much of anything. It's a new staff. It's Duke. They don't have talent, all that.
Exactly.
And it turns out that they play at a pretty good pace. They throw it around a lot. He's dynamic as far as his ability to run as well. Again, similar to South Florida, we have a lot of players on here the week after they play North Carolina. Nothing can fix any L's like a North Carolina defense can. But the good thing is that as we look down the stretch of what his schedule consists of, there's no Clemson.
Yep.
There's no NC State. There's no Syracuse. It's a whole bunch of Boston College, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh, Wake Forest, that type of matchup.
Exactly.
So there's definitely potential there. He's somebody that I'm kicking myself that in my leagues, I didn't take advantage when he was free because he's performing pretty well.
Yeah, and again, like you joke about the fact that again he's coming off of playing UNC. That's why he's got his 30-plus point performance there. But again, he's had other good performances elsewhere. Yeah. Again, against Temple, but even so. And then he had against Virginia, he had a 27-point game. Like again, this isn't like something that just came out of the blue. Like we knew he has this kind of he has this performance in him if you get him in the right matchup. Now, the unfortunate thing about him is that even if you think you have him in a good matchup, like against Georgia Tech, sometimes he can still kind of throw a dud out there. Definitely rolling the dice a little bit with him any given week. But regardless, I think he's a fine pickup and throw him in there as a Hail Mary for your starting lineup if you really need it during these bye weeks. Last but not least, we'll talk about really kind of another safe guy. He's been great in a spot start. I don't endorse him as grabbing him and holding him onto your roster or anything like that. Again, this is fully bye weeks are coming. You need an emergency guy. This is a guy that I'd probably go for. That's Carter Bradley, quarterback out of South Alabama. This past week, he went up against UL Monroe, scored almost 30 points, and he's scored almost 30 points in multiple games. He started off the season against Nichols and Central Michigan, almost scoring 30 points. He has seen 30-plus passing attempts in 4 of his games this year. He definitely doesn't mind using his legs every once in a while. I think he is a nice, safe play for you if you need him. Once again, it's very similar to Leonard. Grab him, plug him into your lineup if you really need him in a scenario. Because again, he's only rostered in 11% of leagues. He's probably out there on your waiver wire. Great emergency option. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. For deeper leagues, emergency spot starts, he could probably get the job done. It's, he's playing in that conference there with the Sun Belt. There's not a whole lot of really scary opponents left on his schedule. And he's got a really sneaky good G5 wide receiver room with Colin Lacey and what's the other guy's name? Jalen Wayne. Yeah, those are two really good G5 wide receivers that he's got at his disposal. So he doesn't have to do much, and they can kind of take care of the rest. So yeah, deeper play here, but solid.
Yeah, a couple honorable mentions at quarterback here. Jaden DeLora, we talked about him last week. Not going to reiterate that whole conversation again. He had another incredible week this past week, guys. That Arizona offense is legit. Go pick him up if you haven't already. He's close to 40%, so we're not going to really talk about him much longer, I don't think. Baron Morton's still available in 80% of leagues. That's your starting quarterback for Texas Tech right now. That's the starting quarterback for Zach Kitley's offense. Need I really say more? I grabbed him pretty much everywhere that I could. I think I have, again, he was available in a lot of leagues, and I paid up big time in leagues where I had to pay up with FOB. So, in addition, Evan Prater is an interesting one to be on the lookout for if Ben Bryant is out for Cincinnati in this next game. Dual threat guy. We've seen that Cincinnati's offense can definitely get cooking at times. I still think Prater's the better quarterback than Bryant, and Bryant's already been doing pretty well for himself this year already. So imagine Ben Bryant with an even higher ceiling. And then last but not least, I do want to throw a quick nugget out for Dynasty players because, one, that is something you guys wanted to hear a little bit more from based on your responses to the survey. Just quick little Dynasty nuggets here and there. Thomas Castellanos, the freshman quarterback at UCF, available in 4% of leagues. Guys, I know for a fact there's a lot of Dynasty leagues out there that he is not rostered in. He is your probably heir apparent to John Rice Plumlee. Even if John Rice Plumlee comes back next year, he really looks like the guy that Gus Malzahn is going to be grooming for that role once JRP leaves. And we have already seen with JRP this year, that is an incredible asset to have. This is absolutely a guy you can grab and stash for right now.
Yeah, I was just going to say he's a dynamic runner. That's obviously the mold that they're going for there at UCF and what Gus wants out of his quarterback, that dynamism with the ball in his hands. But yeah, my only concern there is JRP is clearly not an NFL quarterback, and he does have one more year left of eligibility after this year. So unless he decides to go the baseball route, which is always possible, but he seems to be doing pretty good as quarterback at UCF there based off last week's performance.
He's having fun.
The only other thing I'll say is if you're playing in a league where Baron Morton is still on waivers, please hit me up. I am at CFF Nate on Twitter. I want in your league next year. I will gladly pay your whatever your entry fee is. I'll be happy to play.
Yeah, because you'll earn that back real quick, I imagine. Alrighty, let's get to these running backs. All right, here we got to go a little bit quicker because again, a lot of great football to discuss and everything, but we got some names to talk about here. Let's talk about Marion Lukes, the running back out of Central Michigan. Big caveat here: we don't know what's going on with Lou Nichols. We don't know how long he'll be out. He could be back next week. To me, if you are a Lou Nichols manager, you have to pick up this handcuff. This is a must pick up handcuff right now. Just look at what Lukes did this past week. 26 attempts, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns, as well as 4 receptions for 41 yards and another touchdown. He fills the Lou Nichols role for this offense moving forward. And if you're in a dynasty league, he is also a must grab right now. Because again, once Lou Nichols goes after this year, more than likely, Lukes looks to be that next guy up. I know there is one other guy in that running back room who is also out this past week, but after performing the way that Lukes did this past week, I think it'd be kind of hard to say that he isn't somebody you have to look out for as somebody who's going to take over that running back room. What do you think, Nate, here?
What a weird situation that was. It was, news comes out 30 minutes before the game that Nichols isn't traveling with the team. I sprint to the waiver wire and add Miles Bailey, who was the running back too, the backup running back. He gets the first 5 carries of the game. Lukes comes in, fumbles the ball. And I'm like, okay, probably won't see much of him. And then Bailey never carries the ball again. And then all of a sudden, Luke's goes absolutely berserk and just shows off how dynamic he can be. So I don't know what the deal was with Miles Bailey. I don't know if he got dinged up and they just had to go to Luke's. And this was a case of, okay, we've got one running back left, one roster running, scholarship running back left here. But yeah, you can't deny the performance. Yes, it was Akron, but if you're in a dynasty league, especially, you probably got to scoop this guy up because Lou Nichols, may be moving on at the end of this year. Who knows? Maybe he transfers at the end of this year, goes to a P5 program to kind of boost his NFL stock. Who knows? But it's a proven running back room that has been very successful for fantasy, and you want that RB2.
Yeah, and like I said, if you're a Lou Nichols manager in any kind of redraft league, I think it is worth finding a spot on your roster to go ahead and pick up Luke's, because if Lou Nichols is out again next week, you're going to want to be able to plug this guy in, because all I could think of when I was there was one league where I had Lou Nichols starting, and the moment that they announced that Lou Nichols was out, I was like, well, shoot, there goes my week. Right. So I don't want to be stuck in that situation next week. We now know who that guy is after Lou Nichols.
And it's Bowling Green that they play, so it's
even better
matchup. Yeah.
All right, moving on. Another guy that I'm just shocked is, like, there's no way he's under 40% after this week. Casey Filkins, the running back out of Stanford, rostered on 15% of leagues. Guys, 32 attempts this past week. He is the RB1 for Stanford. 91 yards and a touchdown against a very, very good Notre Dame defense. It was a defensive slugfest that they were going through in that game. He also received 8 targets this past week, only caught 4 of them, but still got 46 yards out of those. I mean, if what you wanted out of EJ Smith, you're getting out of Casey Filkins right now. I don't really know what else to tell you. And like, he is one of the most available great running backs that I think you can get right now. So Nate, what do you think about Filkins?
Yeah, we've touched on him before. This is another really strong performance. This was against Notre Dame. He got 8 targets. He's got 19 targets in his last 3 games. They clearly don't have any other running backs in that room that they trust since EJ Smith went down.
Yep.
So yeah, he should be scooped up. I think the interesting thing is, from a dynasty standpoint, what happens next year with him and EJ Smith? Is EJ Smith, I mean, it's really hard for EJ Smith to say, okay, I'm going to go pro, and you're going to have to base that off of 3 games that I played this year. So it makes for a little bit of a logjam there at Stanford next year.
I wonder if one of them transfers. That would make for an interesting situation.
That would be my guess. Like, yeah, I feel like this is a really good, resume builder that Casey Filkins is putting on tape right now. That if opens some doors for him to be a prime transfer candidate next year.
Could very well be. Or EJ Smith. Again, EJ Smith, there is enough flash that I think a lot of Power 5 programs would be willing to take a shot on him as well. So
yeah,
we'll see. Next one up here. I went back. I don't think we've talked about this guy, but this guy's been on my radar for quite a bit because I never felt comfortable to pull the trigger on him being a CFF asset. But you know what? It's a slower week on the waiver wire, and he's performed very well the last couple of weeks, so I figure let's talk about him. And of course, I'm talking about Roman Hemby, the running back out of Maryland, rostered on 27% of rosters. Had a really good start to the year, 2 20-plus point performances. Kind of slowed down just a little bit, but then the last 2 weeks against Purdue and Indiana, he has been kind of kicking it up just a little bit. A lot of receiving work, which is something you love to see out of running backs, especially in PPR leagues. He has scored a touchdown in 2 out of the last 3 games. I would say that at this point, like, I feel pretty comfortable picking up Roman Hemby and putting him on my roster. So what do you think, Nate?
Yeah, if you look at the schedule, he clearly has performed well, pretty much when you expect him to. Charlotte being the one kind of blimp on the radar there, but he performed well against Buffalo, SMU, Purdue, and Indiana. He did not against Michigan State, Michigan. I mean, those are games you're not going to start him against Michigan, obviously. So it's nice when you can get a guy, especially in a deeper league, and you can start him when you're confident that, and they have Northwestern coming up this week.
Yep.
We don't know the situation with Tagovailoa, but it looks like he's going to be out, and they're going to have to depend on somebody that can get the ball in space and be able to make plays if they're not going to be able to throw the ball deep downfield. So I think at least for this Northwestern game, he becomes a pretty decent spot start. Littleton kind of took a lot of the load. It looked like it was going to be a 50-50 split there for a couple games, but then all of a sudden it swung way back in Hemby's favor once Tagovailoa went down. So maybe that continues against Northwestern.
Well, I think you nailed it. I think the fact that he's a more versatile weapon, like Littleton is the perfect, like, big dude you throw between the tackles, churn out 3 yards per carry. Hemby is the weapon. He is the dude that, like you said, you bring in the backup quarterback from Maryland. I forget his name off the top of my head, but if he, like you said, if he can't throw it deep down the field, give him a short pass to the running back out of the backfield, then Hemby is that dude. I think, again, he has seen 4 and 5 targets in the last 5 games. I wouldn't be shocked if we see 6, 7, 8 targets for him in these next couple games.
He is a great receiving back, and they will scheme up. They will call plays to get him the ball in space out of the backfield. So yeah, he fits that system very well.
All right, from one Big Ten running back to another, let's go over to Devin Mockabee, the surprise running back out of Purdue, rostered for only 3% here. I say surprise because, again, like, oh my God, what's his name?
Doru?
No, not Doru, the transfer from Central Michigan. Oh my God, I forgot his name off the top of my head. I just complete. God, what's his name? I can almost
Lewis, right?
Yes, Kobe Lewis. Oh my God, that was such a brain fart right there. A lot of us kind of expect coming into the season that if there was going to be a running back that emerged for Purdue, it would be him. But no, it's Mockabee right now. I mean, Doru was it for like a minute there, but Maccabee's had a role in Purdue this entire year. No matter who's been banged up, who's been able to play, he's had out of the last 6 games that he's played, he's had 5 double-digit games. And the only game he didn't have double digits in, he earned 9.9 fantasy points. So he's been very consistent week in and week out. And then just out of nowhere this past week for Purdue, 30 carries. Again, we've talked about this before. Like, Nate and I look for trends. We look for guys to repeat performances. But every once in a while, and we'll get to this especially with the wide receivers, there are just performances that you just have to take note of. And whenever a running back suddenly out of nowhere gets 30 carries in a game, that's something you have to note here, and I think Devin Mockabee absolutely fits that role here. What do you think about him, Nate?
He's, again, similar to what we talked about with some of the quarterbacks. This is a flyer move if you play in a deeper league, I think. We still haven't seen King Doru back, but it sounds like he's really, really close. And so the combination of that with the fact that their upcoming schedule consists of Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois, and a bye week thrown in there with those next 3. Not great teams that you want to be able to run the ball against. So that's my biggest concern. But you cannot deny 30 carries. If King Doru stays out and you're going to get that kind of volume, he's not going to get 178 yards like he did against Nebraska. You don't get to play Nebraska that often. But he can still be effective if he's getting 20 to 25 carries against even some of these better defenses that he's going to face the next few weeks.
Yeah. Again, no argument for me there. Let's move on to our final running back here. And this is one I kind of threw on here. I don't know if you agree with this one or not, Nate, but I'm going to throw out Mr. Lincoln Pear, the running back out of Texas State. More than anything, because I just kind of noticed that his volume has been extremely consistent the last couple of weeks. He has seen anywhere from 23. Okay, so pretty much anywhere from like 19 to 24 touches the last 4 weeks. He has clearly set himself up a role here for Texas State. He came over with the quarterback, Lane Hatcher, over from Arkansas State. It seems like the coaching staff has kind of caught on to the fact that these two have some chemistry. They know how to work well with one another. And again, you give me a guy in an offense like Texas State, which is able to put up points any given week. I mean, they blew me away with App State. I started App State's defense because I thought, oh yeah, they can slow down Texas State. Nope, Texas State scored 36 points on them. And Lincoln Pear is a pretty big part of that. So, again, not the greatest guy in the world to pick up, but again, if you're struggling at running back and you just need somebody to plug in any week here, you can do a lot worse than a guy that's been averaging around 20 to 25 carry or 25 20. Oh my goodness, 20 to 25 touches each game for the last 4 games. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, again, similar to Maccabee, if you're in a deeper league or if you're really hurting at the spot, then you could do worse than him. He's a little touchdown dependent. So if he doesn't get that touchdown, you're probably looking at, 10 to 12 points just because he's not a guy that's going to get you 125 yards or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's, once again, it's the Fun Belt. So there's always a chance that a shootout is waiting with each game. So deeper leagues, you could do worse.
Yeah, absolutely. One quick honorable mention here at running back. We've talked about him multiple times. I literally am putting him in. His name's getting bigger and bigger on the spreadsheet every week that he is under 40%, y'all. But say Bangura, the running back of Ohio, we've been trying to tell you guys, this is a legit CFF option for you guys week in and week out. He will be one of the best running backs in the MAC this upcoming year. And he's still available in most of your leagues. He better not be there next week. I'm coming for all of you.
If you play in a dynasty league and he's still available, then what the heck? Come on, guys. Of course, he's a redshirt freshman. He's very good at football.
He's very good at football. They got a really good offensive line there for running the ball there at Ohio. They're kicking butt this year in terms of their offense. I don't know what else to tell y'all.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is that we'll move on to the wide receivers here. And I mentioned earlier, some of these wide receivers, it's about consistency. Some of these wide receivers, they just had an incredible performance this past week, and it's worth talking about them. So let's talk about Tyrone Howell, the wide receiver at UM Monroe, rostered on literally 0% of leagues in Fantrax. He has been a consistent 4 to 5 target guy per game. All of a sudden, this past week against South Alabama, 10 targets with 9 receptions for 244 yards and 3 touchdowns. One of the best performances of the week, well over 40 points. Obviously, you can't expect that week in and week out, but Nate, is that kind of a sign, similar to kind of how we saw with Quentin Johnson, that there's kind of been a switch kind of thrown here? That Howell could be, I'm not going to say a 10 target guy every week, but if he gets up to like 8, 9 targets per week, is this somebody that people should be looking out for?
You can't ignore this incredible performance that they had and him specifically and how he just had this massive breakout game. You have to pay attention to that. You have to go and try to add him if you can, if you've got an open spot, because you've seen what the ceiling consists of here. I will say it seems eerily similar. His stat line, if you go and look at Jonathan Mingo,
oh yeah,
and what he has done throughout the season, and then what happened 2 weeks ago, he had 10 targets, 9 receptions, 247 yards.
Oh my God, that's too funny, dude.
And then you know how many catches Jonathan Mingo had this week?
0.
He had as many as I did. So I will just say it looks really eerily similar to that. But no, you can't look at it that way, but I kind of do.
No, I get it. And here's my thing. He is absolutely, in my opinion, worth putting onto your roster if you have the spot. Like, don't drop a stud wide receiver for him. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that if you put him onto your roster, keep him on your bench just for a week or two. It's the same thing with Ashton Hawkins. I wish I had done with Ashton Hawkins. I was so convinced that Ashton Hawkins would be a big thing for Texas State. Complete disappointment. He burned me 2 weeks in a row. I would say grab Howell, throw him on your bench for a week or two. You might cry if he has another really big game, but at least you have the confirmation that he can do it again.
Right. Yeah, and he's a P5 transfer. He comes from Kansas State. We don't really know anything about him, but I mean, he was good enough to get to get that Kansas State spot for a little bit. So but yeah, I would say let's see what happens for another week. But he's worth the roster spot, and then going from there if he's able to duplicate this. He's trending in the right direction.
Absolutely. All right, next guy up here. We talked about him a couple weeks ago. I figure I might bring him back up a little bit because this man's still criminally underappreciated, and that is Mr. Aronde Gadsden, the wide receiver out of Syracuse. Guys, it's the Robert Renee offense, and we know that once that quarterback loves to find a top receiver, he can do really, really good things for you. And that includes Mr. Gadsden here. Again, over the last 4 games, he has seen targets of 8, 10, 4, and 10. Now, you might be saying, well, that 4 is pretty rough, but that came against Wagner, where they basically pulled all the starters by halftime, and they were just not passing the ball a whole ton. That was the game that Sean Tucker basically ran for half a mile against the Wagner defense. But when you go up against Power 5 teams here in the last 4 games, again, targets of 8, 10, 10. Over 100 yards in all 3 of those games, 2 of which he had 2 touchdowns in. This is a guy that I think absolutely should be rostered a whole hell of a lot more. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, we've touched on him before. The only thing that concerns me is that he does have Clemson and Notre Dame coming up, 2 of the probably toughest opponents on the schedule. But I mean, he scored 30 points, fantasy points against NC State, and that's a really quality defense. So
I'm also not as concerned about this is something I probably should have brought up in the show before. I kind of come to the revelation that like Clemson is not as scary of a matchup to me for these guys as they've been in the past. Because look how many points that teams like Florida State have been putting up against them. Look at what look at what Wake Forest did to Clemson. Again, Clemson was without a couple guys in that game, but even still, like, this defense isn't the shutdown defense like I really thought they could be this year. And they're not the run for the hills, get your guys away from this matchup kind of deal. So I'm not quite as concerned about that as maybe you are.
Yeah, you're probably right. I don't know. They still scare me a little bit, but you're probably right. They've shown some vulnerabilities this year for sure. But like we've mentioned a couple times, for dynasty purposes, this is a guy that still has 2 years of eligibility left after this year. Oronde Gadsden does. So, and Schrader will be back next year. We assume that the staff will be intact. He's a very strong dynasty play as well.
Yeah. All right, next guy up here. And honestly, I should have put this guy as the number 1 wide receiver option that we were going to talk about, because I really should have. I should do a better job of trying to put the priority guys first. But even so, Isaiah Winstead, the wide receiver out of East Carolina, rostered on 25% of rosters. A lot of people remembering that awesome game that CJ Johnson had a couple weeks ago. We talked about him. But man, flying under the radar has been Isaiah Winstead. This dude has been a monster this season, and he's still criminally under roster. Since the beginning of the season, 11 targets, 8 targets, 14 targets, 8 targets, 16 targets, 13 targets. Name a bad volume out of the games that he has played. You simply cannot. The only thing is that he is not the touchdown monster that CJ Johnson has been, but regardless, he's getting you that volume week in and week out. And especially if you're a PPR league, and basically a touchdown just becomes a bonus on top of what he can get out of you in receptions and yards. Criminal that this man is still only at 25%. I doubt that he is still there after this week. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, he's the clear wide receiver 1 there. This is East Carolina offense that gets in a lot of shootouts. 47-45 win over Memphis this week. So this is a guy that's getting 10 plus targets pretty much every game. You've got to add him to your roster, and he's very startable. And I don't know what else to say with that. I mean, he's a really strong player right now.
I would say honestly, like, out of pretty much everybody we're talking about here, except for maybe like Casey Filkins or like, again, Saban Guerra being the honorable mention, like, this would be the guy that I would target the heaviest.
Yeah,
out of everybody we're talking about here.
I would probably agree with you. Part of me still doubts what East Carolina is, and that, like I said, I had Holton Ahlers as one of my regression candidates. I don't think that, and Keaton Mitchell coming back, I think helps that run game a little bit. So
true.
But you know what? He's still had 13 targets, 154 yards and a touchdown recently. So
exactly,
I mean, he's still producing at a really high clip. And even if Holton Ahlers doesn't play great, I still think that doesn't necessarily mean Winston isn't going to still be productive.
Exactly. Moving on to our next guy here. Again, it feels like we've talked about multiple Arizona wide receivers throughout this year. We talked about Jacob Cowing in the seasons before. Again, Dorian Singer has really kind of emerged there, but we haven't really talked about as much the freshman wide receiver, Tataria McMillan. 19% rostered. Again, if for some reason you're in a dynasty league and this man's somehow on your waiver wire, drop everything you're doing, go there and drop all the money on this man. He is going to kill it for Arizona over the next 3 years at the very least. he's been killing it as a freshman. He has had multiple double-digit games, target games this year, and again, Jacob Cowling banged up a little bit right now. He's kind of really stepped up for these Wildcats so far, and this past week has had his best game yet. 9 targets, 7 receptions, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, granted, again, it's Washington. They've been giving up points to a lot of people, but even still, this is a guy that I think is worth having on your rosters. Nate, what do you think of Mr. McMillan, T-Mac?
Yeah, he's a clear ad in dynasty formats. I would be surprised if you play in a dynasty league if he's not already rostered, given that he was a really high 4-star, almost 5-star wide receiver coming out. The beauty of, and we've talked about it with Jaden Alora, the beauty of this offense, or, for any of the assets on this offense, is that the defense hemorrhages points, and they are constantly in shootouts. They've given up almost 50 points the last 2 games in each game. So there's shootout potential, and they play at a very fast pace, and they will abandon the run really, really fast.
Yeah.
And McMillan is one of the 3 beneficiaries of that. And we've seen over the last 3 weeks that all 3 of these wide receivers there at Arizona can be fantasy relevant.
Yep. And again, we'll get to another option here in a second about another pass catching option. But we'll talk about our last wide receiver here first, and that is Mr. Gavin Holmes, wide receiver out of Baylor. 1% rostered in, or 1% rostered in leagues on Fantrax. Very, very similar case as to Mr. Howell from UL Monroe. Just a performance that's too hard to ignore. 9 targets, 7 receptions, 210 yards, and a touchdown against West Virginia. It looks like Baylor has found their go-to wide receiver should they get into a shootout like they did against West Virginia. Nate, is this another case of a guy just peaking at the right time and we never see this again, or do you think this is more sustainable moving forward?
I think we probably see some inconsistency remaining in his remaining games. It's hard to say when Baylor is going to go run heavy versus pass heavy, and clearly against West Virginia it was a pass heavy game plan. I will say that as long as Blake Shapen is healthy, he did get knocked out of the last game with a head injury. As long as he's healthy, he's one of the best deep ball accurate passers, similar like we talked about with Hendon Hooker. He throws a beautiful deep ball, and speedy guys like Holmes, Monterey Baldwin are going to be the beneficiaries of that. And there are going to be some games where he will pop off. So I say if you're in a pretty deep league, or if you're hurting a wide receiver, Holmes is somebody that you could take a look at. But it's just going to be hard to guess when these outputs happen.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, same deal as Howell. Not a guy that I'm grabbing off the waiver wire and immediately throwing into my lineup. He's definitely somebody that'll ride the bench for a week or two, just so I can gauge what I can expect out of him on a week-by-week basis.
Yeah. I will say the guy that you're about to mention here in honorable mentions, I think I would probably take him over everybody except for maybe Winstead and Gadsden on this list.
Alrighty, well, I you know what? I was not super impressed with this stat line this past week, but you know what, Nate? I'll leave the floor to you. Our honorable mention this week is Zion Bowens, the wide receiver out of Hawaii, finally coming back off of injury. His past week, what was his stat line?
I think he had maybe like 5 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown.
Okay. So, Nate, why do you love Bowens so much?
Well, he's been out most of the season with injury, and he's been back. I don't have his stats right up here in front of me, but since he's been back, I believe his first game back, he had 11 targets and over 100 yards and a touchdown, and then he backed it up with another deep ball touchdown again this week. That offense that pass offense of Hawaii is actually really bad, way worse than what we thought it was going to be with that air raid system that they run. But he's clearly their only real pass option that they have, and he's a deep threat. He's a guy that I think will consistently get you 8 to 10 targets a game, and I think that 15 points is right about his floor. So I think that if they get behind and they have to throw the ball a little bit, that you could see him have a pretty solid day.
You guys heard it here. Nate calling his shot and saying Zion Bowen's worth more than some of the official guys we talked about. So I would follow him. He's a pretty smart dude. All right, last but not least, we'll talk about our one tight end. I tried. I really tried to go look for more tight end options. Nobody was really speaking to me that much that was under 40% rostership on FanTrack. Only one that really kind of caught my eye was the pass catching option out of Arizona. That is Tanner McLaughlin, the tight end there. I was very big on the idea that Keon Burnett, the freshman tight end, 4-star, could kind of break out this year, but McLaughlin's kind of locked down that job. And in addition to that, he has locked in about 4, 5, 6, 7 targets. Pretty much 6 out of the last 7 games, he is consistently involved in this offense. Lately, he has started seeing the end zone just a little bit more. Again, the greatest tight end option in the world? No, he's not a Michael Mayer or like a Caden Prescorn or a guy like that. But at the end of it, or a Dalton Kincaid. But again, if you're struggling at tight end, you just can't seem to find a guy that's getting you volume week in and week out. McLaughlin looks like that dude right now. Nate, what do you think about him?
I think it's a great debate when we talk about like a tight end like him versus somebody like Sam Laporta, like a tight end that's the fourth option, clearly fourth option on their team, but plays in an offense that is pass heavy, air raid style, throws it, constantly in shootouts, or the guy that's clearly the number one receiving option, but plays in this putrid,
terrible,
antiquated offense that never throws the ball. So, but I think that he's somebody that's definitely caught my attention. And if you're going to get 5 or 6 targets a game, like I said, if that's what you're getting out of your tight end, that's really all you can ask for when you're searching the waiver wire for guys to make spot starts for you. So I think he's a very viable option. 2% seems really low to me.
Yeah, I think this was last year. This show's been around for a while. I asked Xavier back when he co-hosted the show with me. I gave him a would you rather, and I basically said would you rather have a tight end that's guaranteed 10 points each week or a kicker that's guaranteed 10 points each week? And he said tight end without question because it's just such a volatile position. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. And that's basically kind of what you're getting with McLaughlin here. Again, not 10 points guaranteed, but again, volume enough to feel comfortable with week in and week out with him. So I like it. All right, go ahead.
No, I agree. I'm with you. If you need a solid, 10-point floor type of tight end, I think he's a good option.
Alrighty, that brings us pretty much to the end of our show. However, we have one more thing that we need to take care of. You guys were absolutely awesome in terms of responding to the survey that I put out there to help improve the show. I'm already trying to take a few things that I can now, work them into the show. Some of the things that I might want to change probably won't be able to happen until the off season, where I'll have some extra time to work on some of the ideas and segments some of y'all might have suggested. We'll definitely see about that. But regardless, I promise y'all that one of you would be winning a scholarship tier yearly subscription to campusofcanton.com. And thus, that is what we're going to do today. I have taken all of you guys who have filled out the survey. I have your emails here. I took off the numbers and the in terms of what website you use, because I'm not dumb. I'm not putting your emails out there like that. But I will use it to identify who wins here. I got a random number generator here. We're going to go with the first person. This will be the person we reach out to first. I'm also going to put out 2 backups if the first person does not respond. So first things first, random number generator here, 1 through 25. Person number 22, that is Mr. BL Fawcett right here. Mr. BL Fawcett, I know you listen to the show quite often, so we're going to go ahead and mark you with green as our official winner. The rest of you, I'm going to put down 2 more backup options should BL Fawcett there not respond. Person number 20, that is going to be Mr. CJLA Fernie. You are our backup option if BL Fawcett does not respond to us. And then 1 more backup option just in case we need a third person. Person number 9, that is going to be Mr. Mark Bitt here. So again, if y'all are listening and everything, go ahead and reach out to me if you can. We'll go ahead and try to get that set up for you. I will move your emails over to the guys at campusofcanton.com, and we will get Mr. BL Foss set up with a scholarship tier membership there should they respond in a timely manner. Other than that, like I said, that pretty much brings us to the end of our show. Nate, you have been absolutely awesome. Absolutely killed it this week. Again, so much great football to talk about, and we still kept it right about an hour and a half. I consider that a massive win right there. Again, you got your regression article. I believe you own. Maybe I missed it, but again, you have put out the article about the guys negatively regressing. Are we getting another article that'll talk about the guys that should positively regress in terms of touchdowns moving forward?
Maybe. I got a little sidetracked. I got halfway through it, and then the weekend happened. So.
Hey,
maybe.
Hey, maybes are good because that's still a possibility.
I gotta go out of town this week, so we'll see what happens.
Hey, even so, tons of great stuff over at campusofcanton.com. Go check out all the other articles from all the guys over there. Got everything for your CFF, C2C, Devy leagues, anything you might need right over there. Check out the other CTN episode that'll be coming out this Wednesday. Same thing as always, it'll be me and Chris Moxley. We will be discussing your sit starts and previewing the next week's games. Again, I hope that we can even get close to the kind of weekend that we were able to get this past weekend. It was incredible. Nate, we talked about your article. Anything else you want to tease the people coming up here, or are you just straight chilling?
No, nothing else going on.
Nothing else at all.
Not much.
Again, you guys have been awesome. Again, you guys have really helped out the show a lot this year. We continue to grow. We continue to bring in new people every single week. So I really, really appreciate all of you guys out there. And yeah, we'll keep it going, and we will see you guys on Wednesday. Appreciate y'all. Have a wonderful and blessed day.